almost 50 years, Them Days magazine has preserved and promoted the rich cultural history of Labrador. But Them Days chair Edward Blake Rudkowski says if the organization's funding isn't improved, the future of the magazine could be at stake. Blake Rudkowski says Them Days core funding has been frozen since 2005, and at the moment he says the annual grant isn't enough to cover costs. For more, Ed Blake Rudkowski joins me now in the studio. Ed, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Rhivu.
So Ed, we're talking about different kind of funding because I remember we said annual grants and also the funding that is frozen. So before we get into the details, can you tell me how is Them Days funded exactly?
So the only source we have of funding which we can count on comes from an annual provincial grant from the provincial government. So since for the last couple of decades, we've received a sum in the amount of $50,000 from the provincial government, and that is the only source of funds that we know with near certainty that we'll receive year over year. So that $50,000 obviously does not cover our cost. We have an organization which employs 2 staff, and we also maintain a building and our archives. Anybody, you don't require a PhD in math to understand that $50,000 does not pay 2 people, doesn't do your snow clearing, doesn't pay your internet, doesn't pay your light bill. So the predicament we find ourselves in is that $50,000 grant just doesn't cover it. Now, we've lasted 50 years, and that's primarily because of the fact that we've relied on one-time donations or one-on-one fundraisers. And those have been great, and we're certainly very appreciative of all those efforts, and appreciative of all the people who have come by and donated to us. But it's not something we can budget against. It's not something we can count on. It's not something that we know comes in the door. So under our current fiscal arrangement, we're in a deficit approximately $70,000 per year. So every year, if we don't raise $70,000, we're in the hole. And as you mentioned at the start, we're fast approaching our 50th anniversary. We've lasted 50 years, and that's 50 years serving all corners of Labrador, and all Indigenous and non-Indigenous groups. So if we're going to last another 50, something has to change. I hope it's not a stretch to say that people value the work that Them Days does. We have put no shortage of efforts into maintaining oral histories and photographs and stories, and we've done that for 50 years. And if people value our work, and if the government of Newfoundland and Labrador values our work, then they're going to have to help us, because we cannot sustain losses of $70,000 per year every year. We just can't do it. I mean, just if I put things in perspective for people, if you can imagine paying your costs in $24, which people do. They pay their internet, they put gas in their car, they pay their insurance, what the case may be. But try to do that with the same salary that you were receiving in 2005. And that's what we're being asked to do. We're being asked to live in a 2024 world with $2,005.
19 years.
19 years. 19 years. And, it's not from lack of effort on our part. We've made overtures to government officials. We've written letters. I've had private one-on-one conversations with individuals. And frankly, it hasn't worked. So every year, our grant has not increased. And if we are going to last another 50, we have to change it. Frankly, on our current rate and our current trajectory, you can forget 50 more years. We're not going to make it another 3. And we just can't let that happen. So we've taken the unprecedented step of taking our situation and taking our fight to the public. And for the first time ever, I wrote to the minister responsible, the Honorable Stephen Crocker, and again outlined our position. But for the first time ever, I've copied all Labrador MHAs, because I want to bring in everybody into this discussion. That includes the MHA from Torringate Mountains, from Labrador West, here in Happy Valley Goose Bay, and of course, Cartwright Lanceclair. So everyone's been copied, and this fight, or this argument between us and the provincial government, has been a private one. Now we have to take it public, because we don't have a choice. And so we're going to be putting a push on to bring pressure to bear on our representatives in the provincial government to make this right, because we don't have a choice.
Okay. So, Ed, what are the fundings or grants available to Them Days at the moment?
So there's a whole multitude of different programs that we avail of. And frankly, we have to, because otherwise we wouldn't have made it through this first 50. Our our editor, Amy Chalk, is fantastic at identifying funding sources, but it typically, there are $2,000 here or $3,000 here or $5,000 here. And this funding quilt is just a massive patchwork, which we are obligated to do to just stay afloat. And it consumes an enormous amount of staff resources. It consumes an enormous amount of time. And frankly, we can't budget against it. We can't say with certainty that sitting here today in August of 2024, what our revenue will be in 2025, because we don't know. And we don't know because we have to rely on this patchwork approach. So if the government of Newfoundland and Labrador is serious about helping them days, and if the government of Newfoundland and Labrador is actually values the work that we do, then we're asking them to put their money where their mouth is and help us out. And I'll tell you numbers, okay? So again, as I mentioned, our annual grant is $50,000. I wrote a letter last week, as I mentioned before, and we've asked that number to increase to $150,000. Now, we live in a world where there's multi-million-dollar projects happening all around us, and we're asking for just a small sliver of that pie. That's all we need. We don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars. We don't need millions of dollars. We need our number to go from 50 to 150. And even that small annual increment will be enough to ensure that them days is around for the foreseeable future. And without that increase, or without an increase of similar magnitude, we're not going to be. It's just that simple.
Okay, in numbers it might sound like a lot, like from 50 to 150, but just to remind everyone that it didn't change in 19 years.
Listen, 2 times nothing is nothing, okay? And again, I'm not trying to denigrate the help that we've received, but it's not enough. The old saying is that there's no such thing as a little bit of help, and that's what we've been getting, is a little bit of help. And we just need our provincial government help us out, tell us that they value the work that we do, and help us make it through the next 50 years.
But how does funding for them days compare to other heritage organizations?
So the program that we avail of funds a number of different organizations, and I had to be very careful here, Rhivu, because I'm certainly not authorized to speak on behalf of anybody else. So, but many other heritage groups within the province, as I understand it, are in the same predicament that we are, and they are facing the same funding freeze that we are. So for 19 years, they similarly have been afflicted, and they similarly have seen the purchasing power of the money they receive just get eroded. Everybody knows what's happening around us. Inflation is a real problem in our economy, and every year that $50,000 is worth less and less in terms of purchasing power, and that number has been declining steadily every year for almost 2 decades. It's time for that to stop. It has to stop, because we're not going to make it, plain and simple. And them days is unique in the work that we do, certainly within the province, and perhaps even across the country. There is no other group that I can think of, there's no other organization I can think of that does the type of work that we do with so little money. Again, we're asking the provincial government, give us $150,000 a year. Still not a lot of money, and we'll make it work, but we need to get to that number.
Yeah, so you've already expressed your fear, like what do you fear? That you said it will be hard to survive even next 3 years the way you're going at the projectile. So how might this, if them days close down, let's say, in the worst case scenario, how might this impact Labrador and Labradorians?
Well, look at the work that's been done for the past five decades, and the stories that have been saved, and the histories that have been saved, and the folklore that has been saved, and that work it'll just stop, at least from our perspective. Obviously other groups do their own thing, and that's great. But I think we're unique in the sense that we serve every population. We try equally to serve our settler population, our Innu population, our Inuit population. We try to serve everybody equally. And who's going to do it? If them days is not doing that work, then who is going to do it? And I don't have an answer to that. So, but we don't want to get to that stage. We don't want to have that discussion. We don't want to face that predicament. We want to avoid doing that, finding ourselves in that spot. And we're asking the provincial government, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, to come help us.
Is there anything you think Labradorians do? Like, is there anything that Labradorians can do here?
They can join us. They can join us in this situation. And so, this program, shall we say, kicked off last week when I wrote a letter to the minister involved, and copied our MHAs, as I said. Talking to you today is step 2 in that process, but there'll be further steps coming. We may circulate a petition. We're asking for the public support. If you see your MHA on the street, whether it be Jordan Brown or Leela Evans or Perry Trimper or Lisa Dempster, express your concern. Share, say, Them-Days does valuable work. They saved a story from my grandfather or from my aunt or from my uncle, whoever the case may be. We value that work. And Mr. Elected Representative, we really would like to see you help us, help Them-Days. So the public can do something. And if we circulate a petition, and we're not sure that we will, but I think we will, by all means, put your name, if you agree with what we're trying to do, if you value the work that we do, put your name on that petition, send it to your friend, send it to your neighbor, send it to your relatives. Help us put pressure on the provincial government to do the right thing.
All right, thank you so much for dropping by, and it's been actually a difficult conversation, especially in the wake of losing a local newspaper,
For sure.
telling them to stop printing.
And I hate having this conversation. I wish I didn't have to have this conversation. I wish I wasn't here sitting with you, pleading with our provincial government to stop a 19-year funding freeze. 19 years. That's an eternity. And do the right thing. Help us out. Acknowledge the fact that we are a valued member of the Labrador fabric, and give us a hand.
Thank you so much, Ed, for dropping by. Edward Blake Rudkowski is the chair of Them-Days magazine. We've reached out to the Provincial Minister of Tourism, Culture, Arts and Recreation about this issue. We hope to bring you a response in the coming days.
What's the haps? In Labrador, what's the haps? What's the haps? In Labrador, what's